power, strength, and muscle.
My number one aim over the next few years is to gain functional power, strength, and muscle. Why? To give myself the best chance of living a long, healthy, and mobile life. Coming up, I'll be letting you know why those three things have such strong links to longevity and give an update on how I've been getting on with my own changes in lifestyle.
As an endurance cyclist by trade, I was never particularly concerned with putting on muscle. In fact, I was more concerned with not putting on muscle, especially on my upper body. Muscle weighs a lot, and that's all weight that as a cyclist, you have to take uphill with you. Basically, if you don't need it, you don't want it. Simple as that.
And you don't have to look too hard at professional endurance cyclists to realise that a near skeletal upper body is pretty much a requirement of being a great climber. Even sprinters and classics riders who look muscular compared to their climbing peers are actually tiny when you see them in real life.
And that works for them. But this series is not about becoming the best bike riders we can. It's about doing what we can to set ourselves up for later life, and that means not having a skeletal body.
Before I explain why power, strength and muscle can help you live a longer, better life, I think it's important to define strength and power and highlight the difference between those two. So strength is the ability of a neuromuscular system to maintain or overcome external resistance by exerting force. More simply, strength is how much force your muscles can produce. Power is different. So power is about the speed with which we produce that force, and I think we confuse that in cycling circles. We often talk about strong riders, referring to somebody who can ride all day on the front at high speed. In reality, they are powerful. Power equals force times velocity, so the strength you have and how quickly you can exert it. To use cycling as an example, if you exert a certain force through your pedal stroke at 50 revs per minute, you're going to be producing half the amount of power as if you exert that exact same force at 100 revs per minute.
Back to the main topic then. Why do we need to build power, strength and muscle now? Because we will steadily lose all three as we get older. Just like VO2 max, our power, muscle mass and strength will decline with age so long as we continue to live the same lifestyle. Time for some stats. So, for most healthy people, muscle mass and strength peaks when they're around 30 to 35 years old and decreases slowly after that. Initially, that decline is at a rate of around 3 to 8% per decade, but from the age of 65 in women, 70 in men, roughly, that rate of decline increases dramatically. Those findings have come from NIA's Baltimore Longitudinal Study of Aging, which is the longest running study of its kind, but plenty of other studies have had similar findings. It's a similar story with bone mass, which declines by around 1% per year from the age of 40. The name for age-related loss of muscle mass and function is sarcopenia. The good news is that although you can't completely stop the decline, you can significantly slow it down. Why would you want to slow it down? Well, it might seem obvious, but slowing it down is going to allow you to continue carrying out everyday tasks such as climbing upstairs, opening a jar, lifting yourself out of a chair, or even just walking well into your old age. It will also help prevent falls, and this is a really big one. So if you're over 65 and you break your hip or your femur through a fall, you've got a 15 to 30% chance of dying within 12 months. That's a staggering statistic, isn't it? I should point out that I'm really not wanting to use this data as any kind of scaremongering. I simply want to highlight some of the scientific data so you all have the knowledge of what will happen to your body over time. That way, you can make your own lifestyle decision based on that. Back to falls though. It's not necessarily the complications of the broken bone itself that leads to the patient losing their life. It's the other consequences. It's the loss of physical function from breaking your hip, for example, which leads to a loss of independence. That in turn leads to lessening social interaction. All of these things can mean the start of the end.
Now, in order to prevent a hip or a leg fracture, You want to reduce your chances of falling and also reduce your chances of breaking a bone if you do fall. Resistance and weight training is going to help with both. Increasing your strength will mean that if you do happen to get off balance, you're far more likely to be able to counterbalance and prevent a fall. However, if you do fall, regular weight training will have built up your bone density, making it slightly less likely you'll break a bone on impact.
As cyclists, this is where we really need to be attentive. So people who only do non-weight-bearing exercise, such as cycling, are more likely to develop osteopenia or osteoporosis. I mean, don't get me wrong on this one, because cycling really is good for you, but it should be supplemented with weight-bearing exercises, such as resistance training or jogging. And I've been trying to do both for the last few months.
Another benefit to strength and resistance training is that it will help you to avoid injury in general. The more you can avoid injury and illness, especially in your older years, the less deterioration there's going to be through periods of inactivity. Now, I'm going to try and predict a few questions you might want to ask, but just before I answer them, a quick request. If you enjoy content like this, we would be really grateful if you could subscribe to our channel, give this video a like, and share it with anyone you think could benefit. That really goes a long, long way to helping us continue making free-to-view content. Okay, question number 1, when should I start? Well, just like with VO2 max and everything else I've talked about in this series, the best time to start strength and resistance training is now, but it's also never too late to start. All that matters is starting and then being consistent, making it a habit.
How much should we be doing? Well, that's an it depends sort of question. If strength training is in addition to a few hours of cardio work each week, then 2 to 3 sessions of 45 minutes or so is enough to reap the benefits. It doesn't have to be at a gym. You can do things from home with your own body weight or resistance bands, but I've personally found it easier to go to a gym and have no distraction from what I want to achieve there.
Either way, we should think of all of our training like we would think about saving money. Consistency over time is the key. Put away some money every month, and a few years down the line, with compounding interest, you're going to start noticing your savings boom. The more you have saved for your older years, the more comfortable your later life will be financially. Your fitness and your health is exactly the same as your finances. Consistency over time will pay huge dividends down the line and allow you to live a physically more comfortable later life.
Personally, I'm not expecting to look or feel hugely different after 6 months of documenting this process, but I am expecting to feel a lot of benefits in 5 to 10 years' time and decades beyond that if I stay consistent in what I'm doing. What resistance training should we be doing? Well, I'm not a qualified personal trainer, nor do I know the individual needs and muscle imbalances of everybody watching this. So I would recommend finding a good personal trainer to get you started, or looking at some of the many helpful videos here on YouTube. It's really important that you do resistance training in the right way, as there is a risk of injury, the very thing it helps to prevent if you do it properly. There is another thing that I would recommend you consider though. The size of type 2 muscle fibers decline at an even quicker rate than overall strength and muscle mass, and at a much greater rate than type 1 fibers. So type 2 fibers are often referred to as fast twitch. They're what you use for explosive efforts like sprinting or jumping, whilst type 1 fibers, they're slow twitch, the ones we'd use for endurance exercises because they fatigue much slower. Because of the greater decline in fast twitch fibers, it's a really good idea to include some dynamic, explosive training in your weekly schedule. So this could be box jumps or medicine ball throws, anything that requires that really explosive movement, and that will help preserve those fast twitch fibers. You may also want to know how to test your muscle mass and strength so you can see if you're improving or at least slowing your rate of decline.
Well, you may remember in episode 1 that I did a series of tests, one of which was a DEXA scan, which analyses your body composition, how much is fat, how much is muscle, etc. And also a knee extension test to check leg strength. Both of those are relatively expensive to do. However, I also talked about the correlation between grip strength and mortality, and that some doctors believe it's a better indicator of life expectancy than blood pressure.
Before you spend your days trying to improve your hand strength, I should point out why many studies use that metric. It's because it's easy. So a measurement of hand strength is cheap and easily available. You could use a monitor like I did in episode 1, or you can just time how long you can hang off a bar.
Hand strength is seen by many as an easy way of giving an indication of someone's overall strength, and that's because very few people have spent any portion of their life focusing on improving grip strength alone. So, good grip strength very likely means that that person has generally looked after themselves. The final question that many of you will have is, do I need to change my diet with resistance training? Well, diet and nutrition is something I will attempt to cover in a future episode, but what I will say is that another thing that gets less efficient as we get older is protein synthesis. So if you want to gain strength and muscle mass as an older athlete, we want to be at the upper end of recommended protein intake guidelines. Here in the UK, the reference nutrient intake recommends 55 grams per day for men, 45 for women. However, some recent research suggests that older adults should be eating much more than that, around 1.6 to 2.4 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day to support muscle growth. For me, at 75 kilograms, that's 120 to 180 grams of protein per day, a long way above the standard guidelines. If you are getting that amount of protein, then timing of ingestion doesn't really matter, so long as it's spread throughout the day.
Before I move on to my own progress, I wanted to briefly mention a study that was done many years ago and published in the Journal of American Medical Association. So it took a group of 9 people in their 90s and put them through 8 weeks of what was for them high-intensity strength training. In just 8 weeks, their strength gains averaged 174%, their mid-thigh muscle area increased by 9%, and their walking speed improved by 48%. That's in 8 weeks for people in their 90s. That is how powerful resistance training can be, if you'll pardon the pun. Right, for those of you that are interested, I'm going to give an update on how I've been getting on now. Firstly, the negative part. I have lapsed with nicotine. So a friend of mine uses the same nicotine pouches as me, and I made the mistake of having a couple when I was with him in May. Unfortunately, I then went out and bought another box the next day, and I've been unsuccessful in quitting since. I am disappointed with myself, but at the same time, try not to beat myself up over it. I will quit again soon, at least that's what I'm trying to tell myself. By the way, if anyone you know ever thinks of starting these, tell them not to unless it's to help them quit smoking. They are unbelievably addictive and their prevalence is increasing. So a recent survey commissioned by the Professional Footballers Association here in the UK showed that 1 in 5 professional players is using something like that. In much better news though, I have managed to keep to 2 days a week of alcohol, which has been my goal, and my exercise and sleep has been better than I'd hoped for. So in April, I logged 49 activities on Strava and on my Whoop, totaling 30 hours and 336 kilometers. In May, a month I normally struggle with because of covering the Giro d'Italia, I did 53 activities, 37 hours and 453 kilometers. That's the most I've done in many, many years. Those activities are a mixture of running, cycling, strength training, and walking. And yes, I do upload my walks to Strava, much to some people's disgust. And now, if you'd like to see what I'm doing each day and each week, you can follow it all on my Strava account, so just search for Daniel Lloyd. I've got to say, I'm still really enjoying it. I've been getting to bed quite early for the most part, but then getting up early the next day and getting my exercise done first thing in the morning. I know that's not possible for all of you. Everybody's circumstances are different, but mine allow me to do that. And I've got to say, it's a lovely feeling getting a lot done before 7:30 in the morning. Again, I've had no concrete goals for my running, cycling or weight training or walking. My goal has just been to exercise consistently, to add to my savings as it were, and so far I have achieved that. I've also tried to be consistent with my sleep patterns, but if I look at my Whoop data, I didn't do quite so well in May. So my sleep performance was down by 9% versus April. And I think that's mainly down to being in a different bed for the most part and having different pillows. My average Whoop strain in April and May was quite similar, around 11.5, and importantly, a fair bit higher than those same months a year ago. My average recovery has also been a fair bit higher this year versus last, as has my average sleep performance. My resting heart rate has been lower over the last 2 months than at any other time since I started wearing a Whoop band, which was around 3 years ago. And my heart rate variability is also the highest I've seen since I started measuring it. So most things seem to be going in the right direction. What I've enjoyed most about going to the gym is that whilst you do push yourself to your limit on each exercise, you don't feel exhausted at the end of it like you can do for a long, hard ride or run. In fact, I often feel more energized when I finished in the gym than when I started. Great news for those of you who are considering some resistance training after watching this episode. Just before I go, I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts on strength training and how you've been getting on if you've made some changes to your own lifestyle in recent weeks and months. I will be reading all the comments that you leave below this video. Right, I'll be back very soon with episode 4.